The air in the Willow Creek courthouse was thick with tension, the kind that clings to your skin like damp heat. It was a sweltering August day in rural Georgia, the kind where the sun baked the red clay earth until it cracked. Inside the small, wood-paneled courtroom, ceiling fans churned lazily, doing little to ease the stifling atmosphere. Farmers, shopkeepers, and families filled the pews, their whispers buzzing like cicadas. They were here for a minor casea dispute over land boundaries, but the real drama was about to unfold, and no one saw it coming. Officer Daniel Hargrove, a broad-shouldered man with a buzz cut and a badge polished to a gleam, stood near the front. His presence was imposing, his blue uniform crisp despite the heat. His eyes, cold and unyielding, scanned the room as if daring anyone to challenge his authority. Hargrove was a fixture in Willow Creek, known for his heavy-handed tactics and a reputation whispered about in the Black community stories of unfair stops, harsh words, and worse. Today, he was here to testify about a trespassing incident tied to the case. Across the room, a woman in a simple navy blazer sat quietly, her hands folded in her lap. Her name was Evelyn Carter, though no one in the courtroom knew it yet. Her dark skin glistened faintly under the fluorescent lights, and her calm demeanor masked a storm brewing beneath. She was new to Willow Creek, a stranger to most, but her presence carried a quiet weight. She'd come to this small town to escape the noise of Atlanta, seeking a slower life. But today, fate had other plans. The gavel cracked, and the room fell silent. The judge's bench was empty, the session moments from starting. Hargrove shifted impatiently, muttering something under his breath to the bailiff, who smirked. Then, without warning, it happened. As Evelyn rose to adjust her blazer, Hargrove's eyes locked onto her. "Sit down," he barked, his voice slicing through the murmurs. Evelyn froze, her brow furrowing. "I'm just standing to fix my jacket," she said evenly, her voice steady but firm. Hargrove's face twisted. "I said sit," he snapped, stepping closer, his hand hovering near his holster. The room tensed, heads turning. Evelyn's eyes narrowed, but she didn't move. "I have every right to stand here," she replied, her tone unshaken. That was when it happened, a flash of movement. Hargrove's fist swinging, connecting with Evelyn's jaw. A collective gasp erupted. She stumbled back, catching herself on a pew, blood trickling from her lip. The courtroom exploded into chaos, shouts, cries, people leaping to their feet. The bailiff lunged forward, trying to restore order, but the crowd was a powder keg. "You can't do that," a farmer yelled, his voice raw. A woman in the back stood, pointing at Hargrove. "That's assault. Lock him up." Hargrove's face flushed red, but he didn't back down. She was resisting. He shouted, his voice cracking with a mix of bravado and panic. Evelyn wiped the blood from her lip, her gaze locked on Hargrove. The room seemed to hold its breath, waiting for her next move. What do you think Evelyn should do in this moment to shift the power dynamic? How might her response shape the perceptions of everyone in the room? Evelyn Carter stood tall, her jaw throbbing but her spine unbent. The courtroom's chaos swirled around her shouts, gasps, the scrape of chairs, but she remained an island of calm. Blood stained her white blouse, a stark contrast to her composed expression. Officer Hargrove's chest heaved, his fist still clenched, his eyes darting as if realizing the weight of what he'd done. The crowd's anger pulsed, but Evelyn's silence was louder. She raised a hand, and the room quieted, drawn to her authority like moths to a flame. "I am Judge Evelyn Carter," she said, her voice cutting through the din like a blade. "The presiding judge of this court." A stunned hush fell. Hargrove's face drained of color, his mouth opening, but no words coming out. The bailiff froze mid-step. The crowd exchanged wide-eyed glances, whispers rippling like wine through wheat. Evelyn stepped forward, her heels clicking on the hardwood floor, each sound a declaration. "Officer Hargrove, you just assaulted the judge in her own courtroom." The revelation landed like a thunderclap. Hargrove staggered back, his badge gleaming mockingly under the lights. He'd thought her just another face in the crowd. Someone to intimidate. Someone he could silence. Now, the truth unraveled his bravado. The crowd's murmurs grew into a roarsome cheer. Others jeered. But all felt the shift. Evelyn wasn't just a victim. She was the law itself. She turned to the bailiff. "Restrain him," she ordered, her voice steady but laced with steel. The bailiff hesitated, glancing at Hargrove, his longtime colleague. Evelyn's eyes narrowed. "Now." The bailiff moved, cuffing Hargrove's wrists as the officer stood, shell-shocked. The crowd watched, some in disbelief, others in awe. A black woman, a stranger in their small town, held the gavel and the power. But Evelyn's mind was racing. She knew this moment was bigger than her. Willow Creek was a town steeped in old ways, where Hargrove's badge had long shielded his biases. She'd heard the stories: black farmers stopped without cause, families harassed, complaints buried. This wasn't just about her pain. It was about a system that let men like Hargrove act with impunity. Yet, she also knew her next move could either unite or fracture this room. What choices does Evelyn face now as the judge? How might her decision to restrain Hargrove influence the town's trust in her authority? The cuffs clicked shut around Hargrove's wrists, the sound echoing like a gunshot in the hushed courtroom. Evelyn Carter stood at the center of the storm, her gaze unwavering as the bailiff led Hargrove to a chair. The officer's face was a mask of disbelief, his eyes darting to the crowd, searching for allies but finding none. The people of Willow Creek, farmers in faded denim, mothers clutching children, shopkeepers with weathered hands, watched in stunned silence. For years, Hargrove had been untouchable, his badge a shield. Now, it was just a piece of metal. Evelyn took her place at the judge's bench, her movements deliberate. Blood still stained her lip, but she refused to wipe it away. It was a badge of her own, a testament to the moment. She banged the gavel, the cracks silencing the last whispers. "This court is now in session," she declared, her voice resonating with authority. The room leaned in, hanging on her words. "Officer Hargrove, you will remain in custody pending charges of assault. This court will not tolerate violence, especially against its own." A murmur rippled through the crowd, a mix of shock and approval. But not everyone was convinced. In the back, a group of Hargrove's supporters, mostly white farmers, and a few deputies exchanged glances, their faces tight with resentment. "She's making it personal," one muttered. He didn't know she was the judge. Across the aisle, black families nodded quietly, their eyes gleaming with something new: hope. For them, Evelyn wasn't just a judge. She was a symbol of something long denied. Evelyn saw it all: the division, the tension, the weight of her role. She could press charges and let the system grind Hargrove down, but that risked deepening the town's divide. Or she could show leniency, but would that undermine her authority? Her mind flickered to her own past, growing up in a rural town not unlike this one, where justice often bent to power. She'd fought her way to this bench, and now she stood at a crossroads. The case on the Dakota land dispute seemed trivial now, but Evelyn called it forward, determined to show control. As the plaintiffs began, Hargrove's supporters grew louder, their whispers turning to heckles. "This ain't right," one shouted. Evelyn's gavel cracked again. "Order," she commanded, her voice a whip. But the tension was a live wire, ready to spark. What risks does Evelyn face by continuing the session? How could she balance asserting her authority with addressing the crowd's divisions? The courtroom simmered, a pot ready to boil over. Evelyn Carter gripped the gavel, her knuckles tight, as she called the land dispute case to order. The plaintiffs, two farmers, one black, one white, stood awkwardly, their feud over a fence line now overshadowed by the drama unfolding. Hargrove sat cuffed in the corner, his head bowed, but his supporters in the back row were far from silent. Their murmurs grew into pointed jabs. "She's biased," a man in a flannel shirt hissed. "Can't trust her now." Evelyn's eyes swept the room, reading the divide like lines in a book. The black families sat straighter, their faces lit with cautious pride. while Hargrove's allies leaned forward, arms crossed, daring her to falter. She knew this moment wasn't just about the case, it was about Willow Creek itself. The town was a patchwork of old grudges, where race and power tangled like kudzu vines. One wrong move, and she'd lose the room. She leaned forward, her voice steady but warm. This court serves justice, not division. We're here to settle disputes, not create them. She paused, letting her words sink in. But justice starts with accountability. Officer Hargrove's actions will be addressed fairly, by the law. The crowd quieted, some nodding, others still skeptical. She turned to the plaintiffs. Proceed. As the farmers spoke, Evelyn listened, but her mind was on the bigger battle. Hargrove's assault wasn't just a personal attack. It was a symptom of a town where trust in authority had eroded. She'd seen it before, cops like Hargrove wielding power like a club, communities fractured by silence. She could feel the weight of every eye on her, waiting to see if she'd bend. Then it escalated. A deputy, one of Hargrove's friends, stood abruptly. This is a setup, he shouted, pointing at Evelyn. You're turning this into a circus. The room erupted again, voices clashing like thunder. Evelyn's gavel slammed down, but the deputy kept going, his face red. You don't belong here. The words hung heavy, laced with a venom that wasn't just about the moment. What does the deputy's outburst reveal about the town's underlying tensions? How might Evelyn respond to de-escalate while maintaining her authority? The deputy's words, you don't belong here, cut through the courtroom like a blade, raw and ugly. The crowd froze, the air charged with the weight of unspoken truths. Evelyn Carter sat at the judge's bench, her face a mask of calm, but her eyes burned with a fire that could have lit the room. The deputy, a wiry man named Tucker, stood defiant, his badge glinting as if to challenge her. Hargrove, still cuffed, lifted his head, a flicker of hope in his eyes. The room was a tinderbox, and Tucker had struck a match. Evelyn let the silence stretch, her gaze locked on Tucker. She knew this wasn't just about her, it was about every black person in Willow Creek who'd ever been told they didn't belong. She'd heard those words before, in schoolyards, in law school, in life. But here, on this bench, they carried a different weight. The crowd waited, some leaning forward, others holding their breath. Her next move would define her place in this town. Deputy Tucker, she said, her voice low but resonant. You're out of order. Sit down, or you'll join Officer Hargrove in cuffs. Tucker's jaw tightened, but he didn't move. Evelyn leaned forward, her tone unwavering. This court is for justice, not prejudice. If you can't respect that, you're the one who doesn't belong. The words landed like a gavel, sharp and final. Tucker hesitated, then sank into his seat, his face flushed. The crowd exhaled, but the tension lingered. Evelyn turned back to the land dispute, guiding the plaintiffs with a steady hand. But her mind was on the deeper fight. Tucker's outburst had peeled back the town's veneer, exposing a raw nerve race. Power. And who got to claim this place as home? She knew Hargrove's assault and Tucker's defiance weren't isolated. They were threads in a larger tapestry of distrust. As the session continued, Evelyn's calm authority began to shift the room. The black farmer, Mr. Jenkins, spoke with newfound confidence, his voice no longer hesitant. The white farmer, Mr. Cole, nodded respectfully, sensing her fairness. But Hargrove's supporters still simmered, their whispers a constant hum. Evelyn knew this wasn't over. A ruling on Hargrove would be the real test. How might Evelyn's response to Tucker shape the crowd's perception of her? What challenges does she face in addressing Hargrove's case without alienating the town? The courtroom session dragged on, the land dispute case winding through technicalities. But the real drama pulsed beneath the surface. Evelyn Carter presided with precision, her rulings fair but firm, her voice a steady anchor in the storm. The crowd, once a chaotic sea of shouts, now watched her with a mix of awe and unease. She'd silenced Tucker, cuffed Hargrove, and taken control, but every move was a tightrope walk. Willow Creek was watching, judging her as much as she judged Hargrove. As the plaintiffs wrapped up, Evelyn called a recess. The gavel's crack was a release valve, and the room erupted into murmurs. People spilled into the hallway, their voices a tangle of opinions. "She's got guts," a young black woman whispered to her mother, her eyes bright. "She's stirring trouble," a white farmer muttered, shaking his head. Hargrove, still cuffed, sat under the bailiff's watch, his earlier defiance replaced by a hollow stare. Evelyn retreated to her chambers, the weight of the day pressing on her. She dabbed the blood from her lip, now crusted, and stared at her reflection in a small mirror. The bruise forming on her jaw was a reminder of Hargrove's fist, but it was the town's fractures that hurt more. She'd come to Willow Creek for a fresh start, to serve a community she thought she could help heal. Now, she was at its center, a lightning rod for its pain. She thought of her father, a mechanic in a small Alabama town, who'd taught her to stand tall against hate. "They'll try to break you," he'd said, "but you've got iron in your bones." That iron was what kept her steady now. But she also knew Hargrove's case wasn't just about him, it was about a system that let men like him thrive. Charging him with assault was one thing. Proving it in a town like this was another. Back in the courtroom, the crowd regathered, their faces a mix of anticipation and dread. Evelyn returned, her blazer straightened, her expression resolute. She knew the next step addressing Hargrove's actions would set the tone for her time in Willow Creek. But how far could she push without breaking the fragile trust she'd begun to build? What factors should Evelyn weigh when deciding how to proceed with Hargrove's case? How might her personal history influence her approach? The recess ended, and the courtroom filled again, the air heavy with expectation. Evelyn Carter took her seat at the judge's bench, her bruised jaw a silent testament to the day's violence. The crowd's eyes followed her every move, some with admiration, others with suspicion. Officer Hargrove sat in the corner, cuffs glinting, his earlier bravado gone. His supporters, though quieter now, still cast dark glances her way. Deputy Tucker, chastened but unbowed, sat among them, his presence a reminder of the town's fault lines. Evelyn banged the gavel, calling the session to order. "We will now address the incident involving Officer Hargrove," she said, her voice clear and unwavering. The room stilled, every ear straining. This court has witnessed an act of violence and assault on its presiding judge. Such an act cannot stand, regardless of intent or ignorance. She paused, letting the weight of her words settle. "Officer Hargrove, you will face charges of assault and battery. A hearing will be scheduled to ensure due process." The crowd erupted, a mix of gasps and cheers. Hargrove's head snapped up, his eyes wide with panic. "I didn't know," he shouted, his voice hoarse. "I thought she was—" He stopped, the words choking in his throat. Evelyn's gaze didn't waver. "Your assumptions are not an excuse," she said. "The law applies to everyone, badge or no badge." The black families in the room nodded, their faces alight with a justice they'd rarely seen. But Hargrove's supporters bristled, their murmurs growing sharp. "He's one of us," a woman called out. Evelyn's gavel cracked again. "This court is not a mob," she said. "Justice will be served through evidence and law, not shouts." Her words quieted the room, but the tension remained, a fault line ready to split. Evelyn knew this was only the beginning. Charging Hargrove was a step, but the trial would be a battle. Willow Creek's history, decades of unchecked power, of racial wounds left to fester, would be on trial too. She could feel the town's eyes on her, waiting for her to stumble. But she also saw the faces of those who believed in her, who saw her as a beacon. The weight was crushing, but she wouldn't bend. What challenges might Evelyn face in preparing for Hargrove's trial? How could she ensure the process remains fair while addressing the town's deeper issues? Weeks passed, and Willow Creek buzzed with the fallout of that day in court. Evelyn Carter became a name whispered in homes, churches, and bars, a hero to some, a threat to others. The trial of Officer Daniel Hargrove loomed, a storm cloud over the town. Evelyn prepared meticulously, knowing every step would be scrutinized. She reviewed evidence, consulted with prosecutors, and braced for the backlash. Hargrove's supporters rallied, painting him as a misunderstood cop caught in a moment of confusion. But the black community organized too, holding quiet meetings in church basements, their hope tempered by years of disappointment. The trial began on a crisp October morning, the courthouse packed to the rafters. Evelyn presided, her bruised jaw now healed but its memory vivid. Hargrove took the stand, his uniform replaced by a suit, his face pale but defiant. His lawyer argued he'd acted in the heat of the moment, unaware of Evelyn's identity. An honest mistake, he claimed. But the prosecution was relentless, presenting witnesses, courtroom spectators, the bailiff, even a farmer who'd recorded the incident on his phone. The video was damning: Hargrove's fist, Evelyn's stumble, her unwavering stand. Evelyn remained impartial, her rulings sharp and fair, but her heart ached. She saw the town's pain in every testimony: the black witnesses who spoke of Hargrove's history of harassment, the white witnesses who swore he was a good man. The truth was messy, layered with years of mistrust. When the jury returned a guilty verdict, the courtroom exhaled. Hargrove was sentenced to 6 months in jail and community service, a ruling Evelyn delivered with a heavy but steady voice. In the aftermath, Willow Creek didn't heal overnight. Hargrove's supporters grumbled, but others began to freely talk about the town's wounds. Evelyn stayed, her chambers a beacon for those seeking change. She started community forums, inviting farmers, deputies, and families to speak. Slowly, trust grew, fragile but real. Evelyn's stand had cracked open a door, and through it came stories, apologies, and small steps toward something better. Years later, a new sign hung in the courthouse: "Justice demands truth." The same words from that fateful day, now a permanent reminder. Evelyn, now a fixture in Willow Creek, walked past it daily, her iron bones carrying her forward. She'd shown that justice wasn't just a word, it was a fight, and it was worth it. What lessons can Willow Creek and Evelyn carry forward from this trial? How might small acts of courage, like hers, ripple through a community over time?